a $1.2 billion system, an architecture that the FBI, NSA, CIA, and DEA combined couldn't hack for 2 years. Encryption that all the supercomputers on the planet couldn't crack in 1,000,000 years. It collapsed because of a single post on a programming forum, left 4 years before the arrest, with a real email address typed right into the notification field. It wasn't found by a hacker, not by a cryptographer, but by an IRS agent using Google. October 1, 2013, the Glen Park Public Library in San Francisco, mid-afternoon, a regular Tuesday, a few people sitting at tables with laptops. A young man in a worn-out hoodie sat in the corner by the window, staring at his screen. Then, on the other side of the room, an argument broke out. A guy and a girl, loud, wild gestures, possessing that theatrical intensity that forces everyone in the room to turn their heads. The young man by the window turned around too, reflexively, just for a second.
That second was all it took. A hand snatched the laptop from the table. Not roughly, with the precise, calculated movement of someone who knew exactly what to do and when to do it. The laptop is open. The screen is glowing. A plainclothes agent holds it completely horizontal, like a waiter carrying a tray with a full glass of water. Do not disturb the lid. Do not wake the screensaver. Do not let the system lock. Because here is what would have happened if that lid had closed. Not a lighter sentence, not a partial unsealing of the case. Absolutely nothing. The hard drive was encrypted with an algorithm the NSA couldn't crack in any realistic time frame. The decryption key existed only in the RAM, an electrical pulse that lives only as long as the current flows. Close the lid, and the key evaporates. The data becomes inaccessible forever. Mathematically, absolutely.
He had turned to look at the argument, but the argument was fake. The agents had rehearsed it. On the screen of that open laptop was the master admin panel of the Silk Road, a marketplace with a turnover of $1.2 billion, the largest illicit market in the history of the internet. A system the entire federal government of the United States had failed to hack for 2 years. The man hunted by the CIA, NSA, FBI, DEA, and multiple European intelligence agencies was arrested in a public library using a staged lover's quarrel. But the real story doesn't start here. It starts with a question. How did a 27-year-old physicist from Texas build a system that the most powerful government machines in the world couldn't break? And why did it all come crashing down because of a forum post left 4 years prior, at a moment when he didn't even know this site would change his life?
And the second question, the one people ask much less often, how did 2 federal agents investigating the case manage to steal $1.5 million from him before anyone even figured out who he was? Ross Ulbricht grew up in Austin. Physics at the University of Texas, materials science grad school at Penn State. The kind of mind that simultaneously grasps an abstract structure and its real-world application. In interviews later quoted at his trial, he spoke about the free market with the intensity of a religious convert. It wasn't just a political stance, it was a moral absolute. The state has no right to dictate what an adult does with their own body. He dropped out of grad school in 2009. He tried legitimate businesses, used books, real estate. Nothing took off. By 2011, he had 3 things: technical knowledge, ideological conviction, and free time. From that specific combination, an empire was born. Here was his idea. It was brilliantly elegant, if you knew about 2 tools that already existed.
First, the Tor network. Here is what you need to understand about Tor. This technology was developed by the U.S. Naval Research Laboratory. The American government created a tool that it later couldn't hack itself. Remember that fact. It will come up again. The principle. Traffic is encrypted in multiple layers and routed through random servers around the world. Every node only knows the previous one and the next one. Nobody knows both the sender and the receiver simultaneously. Tracing it is mathematically equivalent to breaking modern encryption. Practically impossible. Second, Bitcoin. In 2011, Bitcoin was worth pennies. It was known only in a tight circle of cryptographers. Most saw it as a toy. Ulbricht saw infrastructure, a transaction system that nobody could freeze, reverse, or trace. He didn't invent either of these tools. He just realized that if you put them together, you get a marketplace that is impossible to shut down from the outside and impossible to trace from the inside. Amazon, but for everything the government forbids you to sell.
Complete with seller ratings, an escrow system, customer reviews, a dispute resolution policy. Just think about that. A guy selling heroin on the internet was actively worrying about the quality of his customer service. The buyer could leave a negative review. The seller could lose their rating. Disputes were settled by a moderator, just like eBay. Only the product was cocaine. Ulbricht took the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts, a character from The Princess Bride, a pirate whose identity is passed down from person to person. Nobody knows who is behind the mask. It wasn't just a movie reference. It was a concept. Identity as a function, not as a human being. And then he did something no drug lord had ever done before him. He didn't build a delivery network. He used someone else's, an existing one, a government one, the United States Postal Service.
The USPS processes over 150 billion pieces of mail a year. Pause on that number. 150 billion. To inspect every single package, you'd have to halt the country's entire commerce for years. Algorithms for suspicious mail existed, but they relied on patterns, identical return addresses, recurring routes, specific packaging. The thousands of Silk Road sellers shipped products from different cities, in different envelopes, without a single repeating pattern. Federal postal workers became the largest illegal drug delivery network in human history. They just had no idea. By 2013, 10,000 sellers, hundreds of thousands of buyers, over 100 countries, heroin from Afghanistan, cocaine from Colombia, synthetics from European labs, psychedelics from the basements of American suburbs. The Dread Pirate Roberts took a commission of 8 to 15% on every deal. Ulbricht's personal wallet at the time of his arrest held $104 million. Total turnover in 2.5 years, $1.2 billion. For context, the annual drug trade of the entire city of Baltimore is roughly the same. One guy with a laptop created an economy rivaling the cartel operations of a major metropolis. Federal agencies knew about the Silk Road from day one. Senator Chuck Schumer wrote an open letter demanding the site be shut down, publicly, on camera. That was in 2011. And here is what happened over the next 2 years. The FBI formed a task force. The NSA plugged in mass surveillance tools. The DEA launched undercover operations. The combined budget of the involved agencies was in the billions of dollars a year.
The result? Here is the exact result. An NSA traffic analysis expert spent 6 months trying to de-anonymize the Silk Road servers. The math wouldn't break. He wrote in his official report, quoted later in court, "With current computing power, the problem cannot be solved in an acceptable time frame." The government that built Tor for its own needs couldn't hack it for its own needs. 2 years, billions of dollars, multiple intelligence agencies, 0 results. But while they were banging their heads against the math, something began to happen inside the investigation itself. Something that turns this from a story about technology into a story about the nature of human beings, given unchecked power. Karl Mark Force IV, a special agent with the DEA, a veteran of several massive narcotics busts, brought onto the task force as an undercover expert. Force created a persona on the Silk Road forums, a smuggler named Knob. He gained the trust of the Dread Pirate Roberts. Ulbricht started sharing operational details with him. Force would take the intel, give some of it to the FBI, and sell the rest of it back to Ulbricht. You read that right. A federal agent was selling the target of his investigation classified intel about the investigation for Bitcoin on the exact same platform he was investigating. Then he started blackmailing Ulbricht, threatening to leak seller identities. He got payouts. Then he used his high-level admin access to directly siphon funds from the platform's wallets. Force's total haul? About $700,000.
Meanwhile, running parallel to him, Shaun Bridges,
a Secret Service agent. He had access to the servers, the transactions, the data. While his colleagues were gathering evidence, he was gathering other people's Bitcoin. Bridges' total haul, about $800,000. 2 federal agents were stealing from the creator of the biggest illicit market on Earth while actively hunting him. The state, built to fight crime, was generating supplementary crime in the process. Both were eventually convicted. Force got 6.5 years. Bridges got almost 6. Both were released from prison long before the man they were investigating. Keep that fact in mind. You'll need it at the end. While all this was going on, one man was looking at the problem from an angle nobody else considered. Gary Alford, Internal Revenue Service, a financial crime specialist detailed to the task force. The hackers in the FBI's cyber division looked at him with the kind of condescension tech people reserve for those doing boring work. Taxes, paperwork. He wasn't the NSA.
Alford thought differently. He worked off a premise nobody else was taking seriously. The premise was simple. It is literally impossible to create a website in 2011 and not tell anyone about it, especially at the very beginning, when there are no users, no traffic, no reputation. You need your first buyers, your first sellers. Anyone who has ever launched a digital product does exactly the same thing. They go to forums and talk about it. By the time the Silk Road launched, its creator knew how to be a ghost. But just a few weeks earlier, when he was just starting out, before the paranoia kicked in, he didn't have that bulletproof anonymity yet. Or maybe he had it, but it was flawed. Or maybe he thought he had wiped his tracks, not understanding how edit logs work on technical forums.
Alford opened Google. Not a classified surveillance tool. Not an NSA backdoor. Not a secret database. Regular Google. He set a date filter, early 2011. Search terms, Silk Road, in the context of an anonymous marketplace. The first hits brought him to the Shroomery Forum, a community for magic mushroom growers. A post from January 2011. A user named Altoid is hyping up a new trading platform. It had the tone of an eager pioneer, the tone of a guy who doesn't yet know how to be invisible, because he doesn't yet know that he needs to be. Alford took the username. He started searching methodically, forum after forum, site after site. Several days passed. And then, Stack Overflow, the massive Q&A site for programmers, one of the most heavily indexed resources on the internet. Search engine crawlers love it for its rigid structure and stable archives.
Altoid. March 2011. A highly technical question about PHP and curl, specifically asking how to configure a hidden service with a specific architecture, the exact architecture used for Tor hidden services. It was the question of a man smart enough to invent the concept, but who was still figuring out the execution. And at the bottom of the post, there was a field, notification email. russulbricht@gmail.com. Not a pseudonym, not an encrypted alias, a first and last name, a real person. Alford froze, reread it. The post was made in March. About a week later, the user had logged back in and changed the email to an anonymous one. He caught himself, realized his mistake, fixed it. But Stack Overflow keeps a complete, transparent edit history. The original email was perfectly visible in the logs to anyone who clicked the Edit History button. The internet doesn't know how to forget. It only knows how to accumulate.
4 years had passed since that post. In those 4 years, a billion-dollar empire was built. In those 4 years, the NSA burned through resources that dwarf a single Google search. In those 4 years, 2 federal agents actively robbed the empire's creator while pretending to hunt him. And during all that time, sitting right out in the open web was a Stack Overflow post with the real email address of the most wanted man on the internet. A college freshman could have found it in one evening for free. Alfred brought his discovery to the FBI. The initial reaction was pure skepticism. It was too easy. It had to be a coincidence or a honeypot. The guys who had spent 2 years fighting Tor's cryptography simply couldn't accept that the answer was sitting in a standard search query. But they checked it. Ross William Ulbricht, a real guy, Texas, physics, grad school at Penn State. His public digital footprint abruptly goes dark around 2010, 2011. The age matches, the education matches, the timeline matches.
What came next wasn't hacking. It wasn't cryptography. It wasn't supercomputers. It was guys in plain clothes, physical surveillance, following a real human being through a real city. Ulbricht lived in San Francisco, rented a room, coffee shops, libraries, walks in the park. The agents began to log a direct correlation. When he opened his laptop, the Silk Road administrator's activity spiked. When he closed it, it dropped. Simple analog observation. Not a single algorithm was cracked. There was just one problem left: the laptop. If they grabbed him while the laptop was closed, all they'd get was an encrypted brick and nothing else. They had to catch him in the act. Screen glowing, admin panel open. And they had to do it faster than human reflex. When a person is startled or stressed, they slam their laptop shut, automatically, like blinking. The FBI had to divert that reflex in a different direction, just for a fraction of a second. So someone came up with the idea of the argument. Rehearsals, perfect synchronization. The couple stages an explosive conflict. Another agent sweeps in for the laptop. Move too early, and Ulbricht reacts to the approaching agent. Move too late, and he turns back to his screen. The window of opportunity was a fraction of a second. October 1st, Glen Park Library. The fight, the turn of the head, the hand, the laptop held perfectly horizontal without touching the lid. On the screen, the Silk Road master admin panel. Game over. On his hard drive, they found a diary, detailed, dated, starting from the very first days of the project. Financial ledgers, private chats with major vendors, the complete history of the Dread Pirate Roberts.
The man who built a billion-dollar anonymity system kept a diary, like a memoir, on the exact same device. And that is the ultimate paradox of this story. A flawlessly executed, mathematically perfect system of protection, and the human being inside it, who kept a digital diary, signed his real name on coding forums, and turned his head when someone yelled in a public library. There's one more chilling detail from the trial. The prosecution presented evidence that Ulbricht had ordered several hits, assassinations of people who threatened to expose him. The money was wired. The photographic proof of the murders was received. But it turned out every single hit was a scam. The fixers took his money and sent staged photos, not a single actual victim. Ulbricht was paying for murders that never happened, to people who were scamming him, while he was scamming the federal government. A scam inside a scam inside a scam. The ultimate recursion of deceit.
2 life terms, plus 40 years, without the possibility of parole. One of the harshest sentences ever handed down for nonviolent crimes in American history. Harsher than the sentences given to many murderers. Drastically harsher than the sentences given to the 2 federal agents who robbed him during the investigation. The judge stated that this severity was necessary as a signal, so that no one else would ever think that technology shields them from consequences. But the technology did shield him. The math held up. Tor was never hacked. Bitcoin was never hacked. The encryption was never broken. It was the human that got hacked. The Silk Road was shut down on October 1st, 2013. A few weeks later, Silk Road 2.0 popped up, then 3.0. Today, there are dozens of equivalent marketplaces operating on the darknet. The exact same architecture, the exact same tools. Some have been thriving for years. The sentence was supposed to be a signal. The signal failed. The architecture proved to be endlessly reproducible. The idea outlived its creator. You cannot arrest a concept.
The $104 million in confiscated Bitcoin was put up for auction by the government. The bulk of it was bought by Tim Draper, a venture capitalist and Bitcoin evangelist. He paid the going rate, $104 million. At today's exchange rate, that exact same batch of Bitcoin is worth over $6 billion. The wealth generated by an illegal empire was seamlessly absorbed into a legal venture portfolio, where it multiplied 60 times over. The government auctioned off for $100 million what would become worth $6 billion a decade later. The greatest venture capital deal in history, and it was only made possible by the arrest of a 27-year-old physicist in a public library. Gary Alford got a departmental bonus. He gave a few interviews. In them, he formulated a principle that has been quoted at every major cybersecurity conference ever since. The most complex digital systems in the world are rarely breached through technical vulnerabilities. They are breached through the behavioral patterns of the human beings who built them. Specifically, through the patterns laid down at a time when those people had no idea how massive their project was about to become.
You cannot encrypt a human being, only their data. Before Ross Ulbricht became the Dread Pirate Roberts, he was on forums asking beginner questions about PHP and signing off with his real name. Because back then, he was just a guy from Austin trying to figure out some code. He didn't have a reason to hide yet. He had no empire. He had no paranoia. He just had a pet project that desperately needed its first users. That window, the gap between I have an idea and I am being hunted by federal intelligence agencies, exists for everyone. And it is inside that window that a person leaves tracks they will never be able to erase. The digital footprint isn't a metaphor. It is the physical law of our era. Data does not vanish. It is copied, indexed, mirrored, and archived. Edit histories on Stack Overflow, search engine caches, web archives, server logs that are kept automatically and for free because data storage has become cheaper than the cost of deleting it.
Ulbricht caught his mistake. He went back. He changed the email. He thought he erased it. But the act of fixing the error preserved the trace of the fix. The attempt to hide the mistake created the ultimate proof that the mistake existed. Here is the math that should keep anyone who has ever typed anything on the internet awake at night. One post, one email field, 1 week of carelessness in 2011. Pitted against 2 years of joint task force operations, billions of dollars in federal budget, NSA supercomputers, deep cover operations, and specialized tactical units. The Post won. Not because the intelligence agencies were bad at their jobs, but because the mathematics of Tor were vastly stronger than the government's tools, meaning the only weak link in the entire chain wasn't the algorithm, it was the creator. In that specific moment, when he wasn't yet a creator, he was just Ross, asking a question about PHP. And that brings us to the final question, the one the official investigation never answered. If a man with that level of understanding of cryptography left his real email in a public forum post, what was that? Version 1, a rookie mistake. He just didn't grasp what his project was going to turn into. He wasn't thinking about the consequences. Ordinary human carelessness at a moment when the stakes felt like zero. Version 2. Why did 2 federal agents manage to steal $1.5 million from him before the case ever went to trial? How did Force sell Ulbricht intel about the investigation and nobody noticed for months? How did Bridges siphon Bitcoin right out of the evidence base and the system didn't see it? If the internal investigation was truly that compromised with corruption, how absolutely certain are we that Gary Alford's discovery was the only path to the arrest? Or did someone inside the system know the name earlier and just waited for a convenient moment?
Ross Ulbricht is sitting in a federal prison. 2 life sentences, no parole. Force is out. Bridges is out. The successor marketplaces are running. Tim Draper made $6 billion off confiscated Bitcoin. Tor remains unhacked. And somewhere out there, right at this exact second, someone is launching a new project, writing their first post on a forum, looking for their first users. They don't yet know what it's going to turn into. They aren't hiding yet. And they are leaving a trace that 4 years from now will be found by a guy with Google and a date filter. Because the internet doesn't know how to forget. It only knows how to wait.